If only self-love were as easy as buying yourself flowers or going on a solo date like social media makes it out to be. The truth is, there are no quick fixes. No single actions that you can do once that will instantly make you love yourself. Real self-love is built through the small daily actions that you do to show yourself that you have your own best interests at heart. So today I wanted to share with you 8 micro habits that you can easily incorporate into your daily routine that will actually help you to build real self-love. The kind that will last long after your flowers have died. As always, I've made these habits as concrete and fluff-free as possible for us, and I also hope that this video has reached you at the right time. And if you're new to my channel, hi, I'm Audrey, I'm a therapist, and on this channel I like to share science-backed, actionable tools for improving our relationships, work lives, and overall mental health. First, we need to cut through all of this noise online and clarify what exactly self-love really is, because unfortunately, self-love is another one of those central topics in psychology and psychotherapy that has lost its meaning thanks to social media and capitalism. I want to share with you the best definition of love that I have ever come across that fundamentally changed me as a person. Love is the will to extend oneself for the purpose of one's own or another's spiritual growth. This is from the book All About Love by Bell Hooks, which to this day remains one of the most life-altering books I have ever read. If you feel like you haven't figured out this whole self-love thing yet, you need to read this book. 2 things I love about this definition. First, it emphasizes that love isn't just a feeling like a lot of us think it is. Love is an act of will. It's an action that we have deliberately chosen to do. This is great news because it means that there are very concrete steps that we can take to build self-love. Self-love isn't just this elusive feeling that we're hoping to suddenly wake up and feel one day. Feelings come and go, they're not reliable. So when we can view love as a deliberate action instead of just a feeling, we can see how we can always choose to practice self-love no matter how we're feeling in that moment. Bell Hooks also very wisely points out that actions shape our feelings. So the act of loving ourselves comes first, and then the feelings of love follow, which, yes, is the reverse of how a lot of us have been taught love works. The second thing I love about this definition is that it highlights that there is no difference between loving ourselves and loving someone else. And just like we would show love to our friends or family or partner through our actions, we can and we should do the same for ourselves. Just like any other relationship with someone else, if you don't put in consistent effort to maintain your relationship with yourself through acts of love, it will deteriorate. And we really don't want that to happen because our relationship with ourselves forms the basis of all of our relationships with other people. So we really need to make sure we get this right. And this is where these 8 micro habits come in. These are those concrete steps to building self-love that the Queen Bell Hooks talked about. So let's get into habit number 1. Hone your inner dialogue. I wanted to include this habit first and spend some time here because our inner dialogue is the foundation of self-love and also of all the other habits we're going to talk about today. The inner critic really does not get a good rep. There is so much content out there on how to silence your inner critic or beat your inner critic as if it's this enemy that we need to fight or conquer. I've tried this approach to fixing my self-talk and it just made me feel worse. All I found was that fighting my inner critic with the same negativity it was projecting onto me just made me feel even more frustrated with myself. So instead of fighting fire with fire, I wanted to give you a much more gentler approach to managing negative self-talk that actually works and that's actually going to help us to feel better about ourselves. I was actually introduced to this approach in my own therapy several years ago now, and my therapist at the time practiced a type of therapy called internal family systems, which involves something called parts work. And parts work is based on this idea that we are all made up of multiple parts or sub-personalities, and they all kind of work together like a family where each part plays a different role. The inner critic is one of my parts, and I'm willing to bet it's one of your parts too. And my therapist at the time walked me through this exercise where I had to imagine my inner critic sitting in a chair in front of me and I had to have a conversation with her. It was grueling. And I had to do this multiple times. It was worth it though, because doing this exercise led me to a realization that completely transformed my relationship with myself. What I realized was that my inner critic actually has the best of intentions. She's so harsh and she points out every single thing I could have done, even just a little bit better. Not because she's trying to tear me down, but because she doesn't want to see me fail. All my inner critic is trying to do is protect me and take care of me. She's just very misguided in how she actually goes about doing that. She's kind of like a tiger parent who's looking out for you and who wants the best for you, but thinks the best way to go about that is by being really controlling and critical, and she just doesn't know any better. When I saw my inner critic in this way as a well-meaning but unskilled part of me, I was actually able to engage with her with compassion instead of hatred or fear. And when I was able to do that, everything changed. Ever since I listened to my inner critic and acknowledged her fears instead of shutting them down, she has chilled out a lot. And as a result, I've actually been able to reach a level of success that I never had before, which is the opposite of what I feared was gonna happen. I feared that if I didn't have my inner critic constantly whipping me to work harder or pushing me to do better, I would fail. And when that didn't happen, that's when I realized that being your own tiger parent doesn't inspire change or motivate you to do better next time. What does is giving yourself compassion and positive encouragement. I want you to experience how transformative it is to have compassion for your inner critic. So I'm gonna share with you a 3-step exercise to help you to do that. And this is something that you can do anytime your inner critic starts acting up. Step 1 is to engage with your inner critic with curiosity and ask it, what are you trying to alert me to? What are you afraid of? What are you afraid is gonna happen if you stop criticizing me? I'm willing to bet that just by answering these questions, you're gonna learn a lot about your needs for safety, love, and acceptance. Step 2 is to respond to your inner critic calmly and compassionately. And that means acknowledging its fears. So that might look like saying to your inner critic, okay, I hear you and I can see that you're trying to help. And I appreciate your concern, but I don't need you to be so harsh anymore. Step 3 is to repurpose your inner critic voice into something more supportive and encouraging. So I'd like you to ask yourself, if this part of me could still help me without being so harsh, what would that sound like? Maybe it sounds like, I know you've been putting this off because you're scared you're not gonna be able to figure it out, but you've figured out new things for the first time before, and chances are you're gonna be able to figure this out for the first time too. This exercise does get easier with practice, and over time, as you continue to show your inner critic more compassion, your relationship with yourself will completely change. And it's gonna be a lot easier for you to talk to yourself in the same way that you would talk to anyone else you loved who was being unreasonably self-critical. Keep your promises to yourself. Imagine you're going on a 3rd date with someone named Chad, and you've planned a walking date in the park. How wholesome. Chad offers to grab you both bubble tea for your walk. He asks you what your order is, what sugar level you want. You think, wow, so thoughtful. You're looking forward to the date and the bubble tea. And just as you're about to leave for the date, you get a text from Chad, hey, I can't make it today. Let's reschedule. And you feel annoyed and disappointed, not only because you're not getting bubble tea, because someone committed to a plan with you and then didn't follow through and only gave you last minute notice. Chad reschedules the date for a few days later, and on that day, the exact same thing happens and he flakes last minute. And by the 3rd time Chad flakes, you have lost trust in him. You don't see him as reliable, and you don't trust anymore that when he says he's going to do something, that he's actually going to do it. And so you don't see a reason to continue seeing him anymore, and you decide to end things. A healthy, loving relationship cannot exist without trust, and nothing erodes trust faster than failing to follow through on commitments. It's easy to see how this is the case in our relationships with other people, but the exact same thing goes in our relationship with ourselves. If I constantly tell myself I'm gonna go to the gym tomorrow, and then tomorrow comes and I don't go, I let myself down again and again. And just like with Chad, that repeated disappointment damages my own self-trust. On the flip side, trust is built when someone follows through on their commitments. If they say they're gonna be at the park at 4 p.m. with bubble tea, They will be at the park at 4 p.m. with bubble tea. And that is also exactly how we build trust in ourselves, by showing up for ourselves when we say we will, time and time again. We want to be a reliable and trustworthy friend to ourselves, not a flaky Chad. We deserve way better treatment from ourselves than that. Now, as you begin this process of strengthening your own self-trust, to set yourself up for success, please start by only making promises to yourself that you know you can keep. Which means not promising yourself that you're gonna go to Pilates 5 times a week if you know that's not realistic, and instead committing to something more doable, even if that means going to Pilates once a week. Because the goal here isn't to push ourselves to our limit, it's to prove to ourselves that we can and we will show up for ourselves. And the more promises to ourselves we can keep, no matter how small, the more evidence that we accumulate that we can, in fact, trust ourselves. Record your wins. About 5 years ago now, my self-love took a nosedive, okay? And this habit was the main thing that helped me to recover. At the time, I was doing my student practicum for my master's, and I had supervisors who were rather unkind, and their treatment of me made me doubt myself so much to the point where I actually sought out therapy for that reason. And one of the other exercises that my therapist at the time gave me was to, at the end of every day, write down 3 things I did well that day. It was such a simple exercise, but it became my anchor, because it helps me to see that no matter how the day went, no matter how my supervisors treated me that day, I could still always find 3 things that I still did well. To this day, I still do this exercise as part of my nighttime journaling, and I find that it really helps me to manage my feelings about not being productive enough or not doing enough that day, which is still something that I struggle with. And if you do too, then I would highly recommend giving this journaling exercise a try. Advocate for yourself. Standing up for myself used to feel physically impossible to me as a former people pleaser. First of all, I had no idea how to go about that. Like, what words are you supposed to say? What are you supposed to do with your arms? But more than that, I was too scared of the consequences. I was convinced that if I were to stand up for myself, the only possible outcome that could come out of that would be upsetting someone and losing relationships or losing jobs as a result, which is absurd, obviously. Eventually, in my early 20s, I had enough of feeling like I was constantly being walked all over and not even knowing how to stop it in the first place. And suddenly I became determined to do whatever it took to learn how to stand up for myself. This is kind of vulnerable for me to admit, but maybe it'll help someone, so it's fine. This is the issue that I had that first drove me to start consuming self-development content. And through all of the books and podcasts and videos I was consuming, I soon learned that my inability to stand up for myself stemmed from a feeling of being undeserving of good treatment, and at an even deeper level than that, a lack of self-love. From there, I learned the words to say to stand up for yourself. I learned the whole I statement format, and at first I was like, there is no way in hell I could possibly say those words to somebody, but I did it anyways. And was it terrifying? Yes. When I first told a colleague, hey, it makes me uncomfortable when you tell me what to do in front of everyone, can you ask me instead? I was probably visibly shaking. The first time I said to a romantic partner, hey, when you do X, it hurts my feelings, I was like sweating. But going through this process gave me real life evidence that actions truly shape our feelings. Like, I did not feel deserving the very first time I advocated for myself, but every time I did, no matter how terrified I was, that helps me to build my feelings of worthiness little by little. Today, I'm at a point where I have no qualms about speaking up, but it took me years to get here and many terrifying instances of standing up for myself when I felt like I still didn't have the confidence to do so. If there's one thing you take away from this story, I hope it's that you don't have to feel deserving enough or feel like you have enough self-love to advocate for yourself. The act of advocating for yourself comes first and then the feelings of self-love follow. You know you don't deserve to be treated like this, and if it were anyone else you loved who was being treated like this, you know you wouldn't sit there and do nothing, and it should be no different for yourself. If you're looking for more guidance on how to communicate needs or boundaries, I have made a few videos basically giving you exact scripts that you can follow, so I will leave those linked in the description for you to check out. But for now, let's talk about the most important phrase for self-advocacy that we should all be adding to our daily vocabulary today: no. And its less harsh alternatives, which I will leave on the screen now for you to take a screenshot. Saying no is the ultimate act of self-respect. And saying no is another essential quality in a healthy, loving relationship. Respecting ourselves means valuing our time. There is no evidence to suggest that your boss's or your friends or your family members' time is more valuable than yours. Respecting ourselves also means valuing our energy, which is an even more precious resource than our time. Because even if you had the time to go to your friend's half birthday party on Friday night, you simply might not have the energy. Of course, there is a balance between prioritizing yourself and going out of your way sometimes for the people that you love. However, if you know that you already have a tendency to overextend yourself, not only for your loved ones, but also for people that you don't even really like that much, it's probably gonna be really hard for you to end up on the side of the spectrum where you're being too selfish with your time. Now, for anyone who flinches just at the thought of saying no, my best recommendation is to start with saying no in the lowest stakes situation possible. So maybe saying no to your best friend has the highest stakes for you. So let's not start there. Maybe let's start with saying no to a coworker or someone we just don't feel as emotionally tied to, and work our way up from there as we gradually build our feelings of self-respect and self-love with each no we communicate. Take care of your health. There is no more fundamental act of self-love than taking care of your health. I don't know about you, but it's really hard for me to feel bad about myself when I'm taking myself for a walk, cooking myself a nourishing meal at home, or getting myself to bed by 10:30, because this is simply not how someone who doesn't like themselves acts. When we do any act of foundational self-care, so by that I mean the basics of moving your body, eating well, sleeping well, we are sending a message to ourselves that I want to feel good and I want to be healthy. These are things that we wish for someone when we love them. And so when we direct those wishes towards ourselves, naturally that's also going to generate feelings of self-love. Also, when you do good things for your health, you just feel good in your body. You feel alive, energized, strong, clear-minded, and when you feel that good, it just makes you love the experience of being you. It also makes you appreciate yourself more, knowing that you are the reason you feel this good. It is thanks to you and your efforts. And probably the best part of all is that those feelings of self-love that you get from doing these healthy habits motivates you to keep doing them. And that generates even more feelings of self-love, and it just becomes this beautiful positive feedback loop. This is another habit where starting small gives you the best chance at succeeding. So for now, I invite you to pick one small healthy habit that you can do in less than 30 minutes. So maybe that's going for a 15-minute walk in the morning, or cooking yourself one quick healthy meal at home, and practice it for the next 3 days. And I want you to pay attention to how good it feels to do this for yourself, and let that feeling fuel you to keep this habit going. Curate a loving environment. Whether we learn how to love ourselves and others will depend on the presence of a loving environment. Self-love cannot flourish in isolation. I love this quote from Bell Hooks because it really emphasizes that we cannot build self-love on our own. Even though the self part might make you think otherwise, our ability to love ourselves depends hugely on the people around us. Personally, the best way I've learned what self-love is supposed to look and feel like is by being loved by others. When someone says or does something that makes me feel loved and cared for, that gives me a model for how I can love and care for myself. I've also found over time that I've started to see myself more and more through the eyes of the people who love me, and that has given me a whole new perspective of myself. I see how I appreciate qualities about me that I did not even know I had until they pointed it out. And I see how they still love and accept me, and they still stick around despite my imperfections and flaws and bad moods. And I know for a fact that if I hadn't experienced that from them, I wouldn't have learned how to love and accept myself in the same way. Now, I did not stumble into a loving environment overnight. It took over a decade of being in a number of different friendships and relationships, some healthy, some not, and many painful but valuable lessons along the way. My experiences have only shown me how true this quote from Bell Hooks really is. Your levels of self-love really depend on the people around you, and that's why you need to curate the people around you so carefully, which means removing yourself from people who don't treat you with love and respect as quickly as possible and seeking out and investing in people who do. And that brings us nicely into habit number 8, love others.
You can't love someone else until you love yourself.
Might just be the biggest myth on earth. Now, is it true that your relationships will likely be healthier the more self-love you have? Yes. However, having self-love is not a prerequisite to loving others, and believing so can actually hold you back from deepening your self-love even more. Loving another person is such a life-affirming experience, and when we can see how our actions and words can contribute to the happiness and well-being of someone that we really care about, that is such a powerful reminder that we are valuable and we matter. Loving others also teaches us how we can love ourselves better, because loving someone involves treating them with compassion, acceptance, and patience. And when we can learn to extend those qualities to someone else, that gives us a model for how we can also extend them to ourselves. Now, none of this is to say that our main motivator for loving someone else should be to work on our own self-love. Rather, it's a nice side effect that when we give love, we deepen our capacity to love ourselves. So those are the 8 concrete habits for building self-love. And if you are looking for more guidance on your self-love journey, I'd recommend checking out this video next on how to raise your self-esteem, because self-esteem and self-love really go hand in hand. But in any case, as always, I hope you're doing well. I appreciate you, and I will see you next time. Bye.